I'm not the kind of guy who starts drama at work. I'm the one who fixes broken spreadsheets at 11 p.m., rewrites other people's emails so they don't sound insane, and quietly pulls projects over the finish line while everyone else is already posting about team victories on LinkedIn. I'll swallow a lot to keep the peace, but there's a difference between being patient and being invisible. That line got crossed at an office party I paid for with my own card. We're a mid-sized software company, one of those places that loves to talk about family and culture, while also pretending coffee pods count as a benefit. I've been there 6 years. I'm not the loudest in the room, but I'm the guy they quietly hand the hard stuff to when a client is about to walk. 3 months ago, our biggest client threatened to pull a seven-figure contract. Their system was half broken, their users were furious, and someone higher up decided we needed a tiger team. Translation: a few people to work weekends and babysit fires while management sent motivational emails. I ended up leading that team, not officially, of course. Officially, my manager, Mark, was project owner. In reality, he joined the calls late, repeated whatever I'd just said in slightly different words, and somehow CC'd himself on every piece of praise. Classic middle management. We pulled it off. Sleepless weeks, migraines, one minor panic attack in a bathroom stall I never told anyone about. The client renewed. Not just renewed, expanded. New contract, new scope, new revenue. Mark sent out an all-hands email about our collective effort, and then spent a paragraph congratulating himself for his strategic direction. I didn't say anything. That's kind of my problem. I keep telling myself, people notice. Good work speaks for itself, but good work doesn't speak. It just sits there while louder people climb on top of it. When the new contract got signed, the company was restructuring budgets. That meant no official celebration, no offsite, nothing. People grumbled, then moved on. I didn't. I knew what that contract meant for our numbers. I also knew half my team was burned out and hanging by a thread. So I did something stupid and generous at the same time. I booked a small event space at a restaurant near the office. Nothing flashy, but not cheap either. I put down my own card for the deposit. Buffet. Open bar with a cap. Some decorations that didn't look like they were stolen from a kid's birthday party. I even coordinated with HR so they could pretend it was a department appreciation night. They were thrilled because it cost them nothing. "Dude, you sure about this?" my friend Lucas from QA asked when I told him. "It's one night," I said. "They worked like hell. I can afford it." I'd just gotten a retention bonus, $5,000 before taxes. After the deposit and estimate, I was putting about half of it into this party. I told myself it was an investment in morale. That's the kind of thing Mark would say, except he'd expense it. The night of the party, the place looked good. Warm lights, music low enough to talk over, little name cards with our department logo. People started arriving in waves. Devs in checkered shirts, product managers in slightly nicer checkered shirts, HR in fun blazers. Everyone kept saying the same thing. "Wow, the company really went all out. This is way nicer than last time." I smiled and nodded and did not say, "Yeah, the company's name on the bill is actually my credit card number." Mark showed up 20 minutes late, of course. Perfectly timed entrance. He walked in like he owned the place, clapping people on the back, doing that half-hug thing he does with coworkers he's never once defended in a meeting. "Grant, my man," he said, spotting me by the bar. "Nice setup." "Glad you like it," I replied. He didn't ask who paid. I don't think the thought crossed his mind that it might not be the company. People like him assume someone else is handling the bill, because someone always is. As the night went on, people relaxed. Shots appeared. Someone started a group photo thread. My team, the ones who'd been on calls with me at 2 a.m., while their kids slept in the next room, looked lighter. That made the hit to my bank account feel less stupid. Around 9, Mark tapped a fork against a glass. The music dipped. Conversations thinned. That's when I realized he was about to make a speech. Of course he was. "Hey, everybody," he called out, standing near the front of the room. "Can I grab your attention for a sec?" People turned. Someone shouted, "Speech!" And he laughed like it surprised him. "I just want to say a few words about what an incredible quarter this has been," he started. "We were up against it, and this team delivered. The client is happy, leadership is thrilled, and honestly, you guys killed it." A few people clapped. My team looked at me, then at him, that polite, tired office smile on their faces. "And I especially want to shout out someone who really stepped up," Mark continued. My chest tightened for a second before my brain slapped me. "Don't be stupid, Grant. This guy was in the trenches non-stop. He took ownership, made sure nothing slipped, and kept the client confident the whole time. Honestly, we couldn't have done it without him." He turned, arm raised, like he was calling out the MVP. "Let's give it up for Jason!" Jason, the junior dev. Jason froze, deer in headlights, as people hooted and clapped. He's a good kid, smart, hard-working. He did step up. But he was also the one I'd been mentoring for the past year, the one I dragged across broken code bases and late-night calls, the guy I literally wrote half the responses for when the client was panicking. Jason's face flushed red. He glanced at me like he was checking if it was okay to be happy. "Come on up here, man," Mark beckoned. "Seriously, you've got a bright future." Jason walked up, awkward half-hug handshake. Mark clapped him on the shoulder like he'd personally carved him from stone. "And hey," Mark added, raising his glass, "big thanks to the company for sponsoring this night. They don't always show it, but they really do appreciate what we do." The company? The room buzzed with approval. People raised their glasses. "To us!" someone shouted. "To us!" Mark echoed. I stood there with my drink halfway to my mouth, the number on the deposit replaying in my head, the email with the venue, the line where I'd typed my card details, the confirmation that had gone to my personal inbox, not my work one. Lucas shifted closer and muttered under his breath, "You gonna say something?" I looked at Mark, at Jason, at the rest of the room, laughing, clinking glasses, talking about weekend plans. No one had any idea whose bonus was evaporating so they could drink cheap gin under warm Edison bulbs. I felt something weirdly calm settle over me. Not rage, not humiliation, just a clear, flat certainty. "Nah," I said quietly, "not here." I finished my drink, set the empty glass down on a cocktail napkin with our department logo printed on it, and straightened my shirt. Then I walked over to the organizer, checked one detail that none of them had thought to ask me about, and headed for the door without saying a word. As soon as the door closed behind me, the noise of the room flattened into a dull hum, like someone had dropped a blanket over the world. I walked down the sidewalk toward the parking lot, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cold air until it stung my lungs. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. Anger has heat, velocity. What I felt was colder than that, heavier, like a balance sheet finally settling at zero. I sat in my car for a minute with the engine off, watching my coworkers through the restaurant's windows as they cheered Jason again. He deserved praise, but not like that. Not as a shield Mark could hide behind. Not as the puppet in a show where I paid for the stage, the lights, the sound system, and the tickets. I leaned back against the headrest and let my mind spool backward through the last 6 months, replaying all the little insults I'd shrugged off because I didn't want to be difficult. The client meeting where I presented the whole recovery strategy while Mark sat beside me nodding thoughtfully, and afterward he told leadership I guided the team well. The time I fixed a critical bug at midnight, pushed the code, and woke up to an email from him announcing that we resolved the incident. We. But that was just the beginning. There was the review cycle. The email he sent to HR saying I lacked proactive communication, even though I had documentation of every report I'd sent him. The meeting where he cut me off mid-sentence to let someone else take it from here, even though that someone else whispered afterward that they didn't even understand the problem. And the worst part, I had let it happen. Every time I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that keeping the peace was smarter, that recognition didn't matter. But sitting in that car, watching Mark soak in applause at a party I financed, I realized something brutal and simple. People like him don't just cross boundaries, they map them and build roads over them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the email from the event coordinator, the one confirming the booking. There, in plain text, was the line that mattered. Final authorization for all charges will occur at the end of the event when the cardholder is present. Not the company account, not a corporate card, not HR. Me. Meaning, the cardholder could also decline. I didn't make a decision yet. Not fully. But something inside me clicked into alignment. And then, silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. A couple walked past my car, laughing loudly, probably coming from another bar. Their voices faded, and all that was left was the hum of the streetlights and the steady thump of my heartbeat. I thought about Jason, about how he looked up to me, how he apologized once for taking credit when it wasn't even his fault. I thought about my team, exhausted but loyal, balancing work and families and burnout. I thought about the hours I'd sacrificed, the holidays I'd skipped, the stress I'd swallowed so other people could shine. And then I thought about Mark stepping up to make that speech, like he owned the space, the night, the effort, like he owned my work, my money, my voice. A micro-catharsis hit me. Sharp, clean, almost electric. I wasn't going to be the quiet guy anymore. Not tonight. I turned the key in the ignition, but instead of driving home, I put the car in reverse and eased out of the parking spot. The restaurant lights shrank in my rearview mirror as I pulled out onto the street. I didn't head toward my apartment. I drove around the block, then another. My fingers tightened on the wheel as the shape of a plan started to form. Not messy, not vengeful, not emotional, just fair. They thought I'd just leave and swallow this like I had every other time. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. By the time I turned back onto the main road, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And by the end of the night, Mark was going to learn what it feels like when someone who's been quiet for too long finally stands up. He wouldn't see it coming, but he'd feel it. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the office, the building dark except for a few emergency lights glowing faintly behind the glass. My badge beeped softly as I scanned it, the sound unnervingly loud in the empty lobby. The quiet felt surgical, clean, like the whole place was holding its breath. I wasn't here to steal anything or break in or do something illegal. I'm not that guy. But I was done letting people walk over me and pretend they couldn't feel my spine. I walked down the hallway toward our department suite, passing the corkboard where HR liked to pin employee spotlight posters. Mark had 3 up there. One of them featured a quote he'd once lifted from my project notes. I stood in front of it for a long moment, not angry, just auditing the truth. Inside our suite, I flicked on the lights over my row of desks. My laptop was exactly where I'd left it earlier that day, lid closed, charging cable neatly coiled. I sat down, woke the screen, and opened the folder that mattered most, the project repository. My project repository. People forget something. When you lead a crisis recovery for a client, you end up building half the systems yourself. Documentation, scripts, workflows, automations. Not because you want the credit, because nobody else is awake at 1:50 a.m., fixing cascading failures. For weeks, I'd been the only one maintaining the internal tools that kept the client system stable. Mark kept telling leadership it was a collaborative structure of shared responsibilities, which sounded impressive but meant nothing. In reality, the skeleton of the entire platform rested on a set of modules I'd written myself. Modules that were technically optional, but without them, the client's new contract wouldn't function for more than a day or two. And here's the important part. I had never signed over ownership of those modules to the company, because nobody had asked. They weren't part of the scope. I had built them as temporary stopgaps. My own time, my own code, my own library. And because Mark never bothered to ask how things actually worked, he had no idea. I opened the directory, selected the folder, and read through every line of code, not to delete it, not to break anything, but to make sure it was exactly what I remembered. Clean, documented, mine. Then I opened the email client and drafted a message to the CTO. Not bitter, not emotional, just factual. Hi, Karen. As discussed during the initial crisis response, I'm withdrawing the supplemental tooling libraries I created independently for the client's environment. These were provided temporarily to stabilize the deployment and were never transferred or licensed to the company. I've removed access from the internal repository. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed with the transition plan. Grant. I didn't hit send yet. Timing mattered. I pulled out the USB key where I kept backups of my personal code. I transferred my files, nothing belonging to the company, nothing confidential, just my independent work, then wiped them from the internal repo with a clean, transparent commit, reverting temporary personal modules. Project owner withdrew consent. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed the laptop and looked around the silent office. Everything felt balanced, precise, like the first step of something overdue. And then came the mini-hook moment, the one that ignited the real chaos. As I walked toward the door, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. Dude, something's happening at the restaurant. Call me. I didn't know it yet, but that decision I made, the clean, quiet, perfectly legal removal of my own work, would cost someone in that building everything they thought was untouchable. I slid my phone back into my pocket and kept walking. They thought I'd just take the disrespect and let it rot inside me. They thought I was done. They were wrong. Back at the entrance, the cold air hit me again. I felt the micro-catharsis rise, sharp and satisfying. Not revenge, not pettiness, just the sensation of finally shifting the weight off my own shoulders and onto the person who had been leaning on me for far too long. By the time I got back to my car, I'd already decided what the next few hours would look like, and Mark had no idea the ground beneath him had just started to crack. By the time I reached the parking lot outside my apartment, the first ripples of what I'd done were already spreading. 3 missed calls from Lucas, 1 from Jenna in HR, a Slack notification explosion. I didn't open any of them. I knew exactly what they were about. I took a shower, changed into a clean shirt, sat at my kitchen table, and only then opened my laptop. The messages painted the picture clearly. The system was breaking, and fast. Not crashing. That wasn't my style. Just losing the stabilizers, the temporary supports, the parts only I had ever touched, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Around 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again. An email from CTO Karen. Subject, urgent, call me. I didn't. I wasn't hiding. I had nothing to hide. Everything I'd done was documented, time-stamped, legal, and explicitly mine. But I wasn't going to get dragged into a midnight panic meeting so they could ask me to fix a problem I had already fixed for them once, quietly, for free, without recognition. That grant was gone. The next morning at 7:30, I walked into the office holding a coffee. I didn't rush to drink. No guilt. No nerves, just a calm I hadn't felt in months. The moment I stepped in, I saw it. A cluster of people in the conference room, faces tight. Mark standing near the whiteboard with his hands on his hips, sweating like someone had turned the thermostat up just for him. He spotted me instantly. Grant, hey, we need you in here. I don't stop walking. I just got in, I said evenly. Let me put my bag down. He followed me out of the conference room like a shadow, trying to reattach itself. Listen, he hissed, lowering his voice. We've got a serious issue. Something in the deployment reverted last night, and we... I know, I cut in. His mouth opened, and then closed. You... know? Yes, I said. I submitted a revert commit. The libraries were my personal tooling, and I withdrew them. I emailed Karen. His face lost a little color. You what? You can't. That's not... We need those. The system depends on them. I looked him dead in the eyes. Then maybe you shouldn't have thanked someone else for the work I did and called it company-sponsored when it was my bank account paying for the entire night. The hallway went quiet. Someone nearby pretended to check the copier. Mark swallowed hard. Grant, let's talk about this in private. No, I said. This started in public. It's fine if it continues in public. He blinked rapidly, panic rising. You're sabotaging the project. No, I corrected. I stopped doing unpaid work. There's a difference. I walked past him and into the conference room. Karen, the CTO, looked up immediately. Grant, she said, relief and urgency mixing in her tone. We need your help. The client environment is destabilizing and... I raised a hand. The temporary libraries I built weren't part of my job description, weren't company property, and were never transferred. I provided them as a courtesy. Courtesy ends when respect ends. She stared at me, processing. Unlike Mark, Karen was sharp. Can you provide a transition or rebuild plan? She asked carefully. Yes, I said, after we renegotiate my role, title, and compensation. Not with Mark, with you. A beat of silence. Then she nodded, slowly, deliberately. Understood. Mark, step out for a minute. And just like that, the ground under him finally collapsed. He sputtered. Karen, we need to... I'm project owner. I should... That's the issue, she said without looking at him. Step out. He left the room stiffly, the door clicking shut behind him like a verdict. The satisfying part wasn't what happened next. It was how ordinary it felt. We talked for 40 minutes. My work, my hours, my contributions, the modules, the crisis I'd carried alone while someone else took bows for it. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She didn't gaslight me with team effort cliches. She asked questions, took notes, and listened like a person who had just realized a foundational pillar of her department wasn't who she thought it was. By the end of the meeting, I had a promotion to lead systems architect, a salary bump large enough to make me blink, a bonus equal to the contract renewal I'd saved, direct reporting to the CTO, and full autonomy over the client's technical strategy. But the real victory happened outside the conference room. I walked out just in time to see Mark sitting at his desk, staring at an email titled, Reassignment Plan, Effective Immediately. Not a firing, a quiet demotion, a leash cut short, a man finally standing without the foundation he'd stolen from someone else. He didn't look up when I passed him, and I didn't slow down. By the end of the week, the best part arrived quietly. Jason stopped by my desk with 2 coffees and set one down. I told Karen the truth, he said quietly. About everything. About who did the real work. She already knew most of it, but I wanted to say it anyway. I nodded. I know you didn't ask for any of that spotlight. He shook his head. You deserved it, not him. For the first time in a long time, I believed someone, and the final micro-catharsis. The restaurant emailed me. Hi, Grant. Just confirming your request last night. The remaining balance was declined, and per your cardholder agreement, the event was charged to the company account on file for departmental bookings. Mark had used the office's event profile to reserve glassware, which automatically linked the official payment method as backup. I didn't say a word. A quiet win is still a win. That night, I sat in my apartment. Lights low, windows open. No noise, no tension. Just air I could finally breathe. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It's just the moment you stop carrying what was crushing you. They thought I'd walk away defeated. I walked away promoted, respected, and finally done being the guy in the background. As for Mark, well, some lessons arrive in silence, and some bills arrive with interest.